Today's daf we're going to be learning is Bava Kamma daf Tzadi Aleph. Today's daf is sponsored by Becky Goldstein in loving memory of her mother, Shoshana Rosa Bat Shmuel and Mindalea, a self-made woman who at the age of 60 graduated high school with honors. She found fulfillment in the sanctuary of Torah learning, which she bequeathed to her children and grandchildren. She was known for the trait of hakarat hatov, always the force to thank a lecturer and to express appreciation. We had this zchut to bring her an aliyah at the age of 90. We miss her every day. Yehi zichra baruch. I want to clarify something from yesterday that someone pointed out after class, which is that when we talked about the two different owners being liable for having the slave go free, we're obviously talking about each one, if this one did it or if that one did it. It wasn't a case where they both did it together. It wasn't a case where they both knocked out the eye or whatever case it might be that we were talking about, but it was a case of either this one or that one, if he was the one to do it or if the other one was the one to do it. Okay, now we're going to go back to our case that we ended with yesterday at the braita at the bottom of Tzad Yomi. We'll just start there again. Tanu Rabbanit. We have two cases, a shor tam versus a shor muad, who does two actions. First, kills someone and then goes and injures someone. And then the question is, can we judge them for both? If it's shor tam, we can only judge for the dinei nefashot, not for the dinei mamona. We can only judge for the fact that he killed, not for the dinei mamona. Why? Because the shor tam, if you remember, pays from the body of the shor. So let's say we do the dinei mamona first, and we give the person the shor, right, as the value for what they're owed. And then we're going to kill the shor. So they're not going to end up with really anything because the shor isn't worth anything, right? They're going to end up killing the shor, or even if you say they get the value of the shor, but the shor itself is worth nothing because it's supposed to get killed. So we can't do it that way. So what do? We just do the dinei nefashot and we kill the shor. There is no way to really pay the tashlumi. But because the shor muad is min aliyah, you can do both. However, the braita sets up, it depends on the order. So muad shemi vezi danimo to dinei mamonot. First, you judge them for what they owe, and then chozrim v'danimo to dinei nefashot. And then you judge for the fact that the shor should get killed. Well, kadmu v'danu dinei nefashot. But if you first did the dinei nefashot and then ruled that the shor gets killed, ein chozrim v'danimo to dinei mamonot. Then you can't do the dinei mamonot anymore. Now, this doesn't make much sense because if we said that the shor muad pays mina aliyah, the owner pays from from out of pocket, it should have no bearing on if we kill the shor, still the owner is liable for the damages the shor caused to somebody else. So why would this be? So that's the Gemara's question. There should be no reason why you can't do the mamono case after the shor is killed. To which they say, so we're going to have two answers. Rabba is going to first quote the rabbis in the house of Rabba saying one thing, and then Rabba is going to say, I think you could say it some other way. And then we're going to understand right away why this is brought up in our Gemara and what this has anything to do with anything. Amar Rabba, I heard the rabbis in the house of Rabba say the following. Hamani, Rabbi Shimon haTimni. This is Rabbi Shimon haTimni's position. Why? Amar, ma egrof miyuchad shemashor le'edav le'edim. What did he say? I have to correct something I said yesterday. This pasuk about the Evan and a growth is not in a death case. I'm sorry. It's in a case of injury. That's not death. Okay. The pasuk reads like this. If men are fighting, when one hits the other, be'evan obe growth with a stone or with a fist, v'lo yamut, and he doesn't die, v'nafal mishkav, and then you assess damages. This proves that in a case of damages, there's a need for umdin. Okay, there's a different pasuk which proves it in death. Okay, that's a different pasuk which says, here I'll find the pasuk, which we're going to get to soon. It's not going to be in the Gemara, but im be'evan yad asher yamut ba hikau v'yamot. If it's an evan yad, and a stone he held in his hand, which could kill. So now how do you know it could kill? Because you need to assess, could this kill? Okay, we're going to get back to that later. The fact that, is it by death? Is it by nizikim? But in any case, let's just keep focused on where we are right now. Rabbi Shimon haTimni says you need umdina by nizikin also, okay? Meaning, what did he say? You have to bring the implement to court. Now it's going to be pretty obvious. Well, we're going to have to add one thing, but kevan de gamar dine lektala, if we first bring the shor to court and then rule that it's supposed to get killed, we then can't do the dinei mamona. Why? Well, what's the implement that was used? The shor itself. So, and Lo mashhina leumdina de beidina velo ma'anina ledina. Well, what's the problem? We can't leave the shor to then assess in the din mamano case. Let's say on Monday they go to court to judge the din nefasho, and then on Tuesday we're going to do the din mamano. You can't. Why? There's something called shasur la'anot et hadin. What does that mean? Usually it's talked about in a capital crime. If somebody kills someone and now we want to go kill them in court, so we rule about them in court and we say, you're convicted, you get the death penalty. We kill them on that day. Why? Because it's torture to a person. Inoi means to torture. It's torture to a person to have them know that they're going to be executed and then not do it for another few days. So we view it as a way of being nicer to the person, even though it doesn't sound much nicer. But in order not to delay, we're not allowed to delay. You have to do it that day. Same holds for a shor. Now, this is a little strange. Shor doesn't have any understanding, you're about to be killed. So it's a little strange that we have this law of inoi adin. It's learned out apparently from in the pasuk where the shor gets killed. If you remember, it says v'gamba alav yumat, and the owner's supposed to die also. And then we say, well, you could pay the ransom. But because it says the owner's supposed to die also, they make a hekesh between a comparison, juxtaposition between the person and the shor. And from there, you learn that there's also inoi hadin for a shor. Now, once you have inoi hadin, it becomes clear how this works in with Rabbi Shimon haTimni. If we kill the shor right away, before we do the dinei mamonot, then when it comes to the dinei mamonot, we won't be able to have the shor in front of us because the shor is dead. And then you won't have the implement that killed, in this case being the shor, and then you won't be able to judge the dinei mamonot case. And that's the easy way to explain this opinion. That's what the people of the house of Rav said to Rav. Rav says, V'amina lu'ana, he says, what are you talking about? Afilu tamer Rabbi Akiva, I can make it work even for the other opinion. The opinion that says you don't need to have the implement, so theoretically you could judge the dinei mamonot, but I'll give you a different answer. The reason we can't judge the dinei mamonot case here is because after the dinei nefashot, the owner ran away. The Rambam actually says it's the shor that ran away, but we're going to go with the main opinion, which is the owner ran away. Now, if the owner runs away, we can't do a dinei mamonot case. Why is that? Because there's a principle, Rashi quotes it, that we've seen before, ein chavin la'adam shelo b'fanav. You're not allowed to rule against someone that in a case where we're going to make them pay if they're not there. So if the guy ran away in between, now you'd have to say that's what they're talking about in this braita. It didn't say that. Where the guy ran away and all that was left behind was the shor. Okay, he leaves the shor behind, but he ran away. Now, to which the Gemara says, well, if he ran away, ki lo danuhu dinei nefashot, hechi danina le dinei mamonot below ba'alim. Wait a minute. If the case where you did the dinei nefashot and the guy runs away and therefore you can't do the dinei mamonot, the other case, which you can do, is do the dinei mamonot and then do the dinei nefashot. But if the guy ran away, in other words, we're assuming both are the same case, how could you do the dinei mamonot in that case? It doesn't make any sense. To which they say, it must be the kabil sahade ubaha. It must be that the guy was actually convicted and then ran away. So if you do the dinei nefashot and then you do the dinei mamonot and then the guy runs away, now in this case, it's not anymore an issue of ein chavin la'adam shelo b'fanav because they already ruled against him. Now what's the issue? The issue is, can you collect the money from the shor? Because the shor is still there. He left his shor behind. Now, all he left is his shor. He has no more property. Now, if I get convicted and then I run away, the court can come and take from my possessions to pay the amount. So now we're going to have to figure out. So in the case where you did the nefashot and then you do the mamonot, obviously it's not going to work because you have to kill the shor. And if all you have is the shor to pay, well, there's nothing to pay. Even if you would pay the mamonot first, right? You're then going to, a minute later, take away the shor and kill the shor. So there's no way it could work if you do nefashot first, if all you have left is the shor and you've run away. So it must be you did mamonot and then you did nefashot, okay? And you, after you did the mamonot, you ran away. And now we have no way to collect from you other than from the shor. Well, now still you're going to have a problem. Self, I don't understand though. Still, you're going to pay with the ox and then you're going to kill the shor. That's not going to help. Whoever got the ox is now going to end up without an ox because they're going to kill the ox. So I don't get it. Then it's no different than the shor tam that we talked about because you could pay migufo, but then in the end they're going to kill, you're really getting nothing. So what do they answer? Meridia. What happens here is you before you do the dina, now remember, dina nefashot, once you do it, you have to kill the shor immediately. So what do? You push off the judgment for the nefashot. Okay, again, let's go back to the case the way we've set it up. They judged them for mamonot. Then the owner ran away and left just the shor behind, this ox. So what do? They give the ox right now to the person who was damaged. And then they say to him, use this ox, rent it, so to speak. Use it as a rental for however, let's say you owe 100 shekels or $100. And let's say it costs, a rental of a shor for 2 months is $100. So to use it for plowing. So the ridya is plowing. So rent it to use for plowing for 2 months. When the 2 months are up, you'll have gotten your value. Then we'll take the ox to court for killing. Now that you could do, because that's not a chov. It is a chov, but it's not like we're going to make the person pay money. That's a different kind of case. That's an nefashot case. They killed a person. We can judge that even if the owner's not there. So that's what we're going to do. And that's an explanation of how we can understand that braita, that it doesn't only accord with Rabbi Shimon haTimni, doesn't really have to do with umdana, has to do with a different issue, which is how are you going to pay from this shor, from this owner, if all he has is the shor? So now the Gemara has one last question, which is, if you have this solution of ridya, of rent it out and use the rental cost as your way of paying back this person for the damages, tam. Well, then let's go back to our short time. If the whole problem was you can only use it from the body of the animal. So rent out the animal temporarily, do the dine mamonot, use the rental cost as your way of paying the damages. And then right, and do that. And then and then if we can push off the judgment of the death. So do that, and then kill the shor later, and then you resolved it. And then why do we say by short time you can't do that? To which they answer, remember, there's migufo and there's mina aliyah. The short time is paid from the body of the animal, and the shor muad is mina aliyah. That means, right, we can take it from any other money of the owner of that shor. Using the shor as a rental must come under the context of aliyah and not migufo. Migufo means you get the animal's yours. Not we rent you the animal for X amount of time. That's something different. That's already called aliyah. And that's why this can be a solution for the shor muad, but it wouldn't help us for the short time. And that's why the shor muad, we could do it, but the short time we can't. Okay, so basically, in a nutshell, what we did in that sugya was, we brought this braita that distinguished between short time, shor muad. We didn't understand why the shor muad works in one direction, not the other. If you do the mamonot first, you can then do the nefashot, but it doesn't work the reverse. We thought maybe it doesn't work in the reverse because of the issue of Rabbi Shimon haTimni, because the shor is no longer there to bring before you. In the end, Rabba was able to explain it also according to Rabbi Akiva, and that the issue is only in a case, again, it was being ukimta, the braita is only in a case where the owner ran away and only left the shor. And then we're going to have if you do the nefashot first, the shor is going to be gone and you have no way to pay. If you do the mamonot first, you can rent it out in the meantime and push off the judgment about the nefashot, and then you can do it. Okay. Now we go to the second sugya for today. Yesh omed l'nezikin o ein omed l'nezikin. Do you need to evaluate when it comes to damages? Could this implement have caused that amount of damage or not? Do we say, it's obvious that you do it when it comes to a death case. And that's because of that pasuk I quoted you just before, which we hadn't seen before, but about the Evan Yad Ki Yamutu, right? We assess it that it can kill. In this way, a person could get killed, or in this way, a person can't get killed, and therefore the death must be from something else, and you're not going to get the death penalty. But maybe when it comes to damages, it doesn't matter if I punch someone and I have a very weak fist. But in any case, the person got injured, maybe it doesn't matter what power I had to injure or not. If the person ends up with damage, I have to pay it no matter what. Oh, Dilma Loshna. Or maybe it doesn't make a difference. Right. Or maybe Loshna means it's no different. Maybe it's exactly like death. And maybe it's only if my fist is strong enough to punch someone. But if my fist is a very weak fist and I can't really, and I did hit someone and somehow they got this big bruise on them, maybe it was from something else. Maybe, their body had a crazy reaction, but we can't blame me for that. Okay, so that's the question. Now, you might say, why are they asking this question? Didn't we already resolve this? Didn't Rabbi Shimon haTimni and Rabbi Akiva both agree that there's a need for umdana, if you remember? Just Rabbi Shimon haTimni said You have to actually bring the implement to court. Just like your growth can show up in court, we have to bring whatever implement it is to assess. And as I told you before, that was about damages, the pasuk that he brought, not about death. Rabbi Akiva disagrees, but he agrees that you need umdana. He just says you don't need it to be actually physically brought to court. You rely on the witnesses to do that assessment. They saw what happened. They can assess, was that implement enough? Remember, he said in the case where you couldn't even see the stone that he used, then they're not going to be able to, because they have to do the assessment. It doesn't have to be done in court, but the witnesses need to do it. So they both agree there's umdana. So it's a little strange why they're asking this question. The answer is that they didn't know about that braita when they asked this question. And what we're going to see is 4 different answers. We're going to reject the first 3. The 4th one is going to be Rabbi Shimon haTimni and Rabbi Akiva's debate. And then that's going to be the answer. Of course, there's umdana l'nizikin. So we know exactly what the answer is going to be, even though they didn't know it when they were learning this. Okay, and it only came about on account of their asking. That's because braita were orally passed down. So you might not have heard a certain braita. And so that's our question. Tashma, first source. Now we're going to go back and review a source we saw a long time ago and look at it in a bit of a different way than we looked at it before. If you have a bore that's 10 tefachim deep, that is a bore that's assessed that it could kill somebody. What if it's less than 10 tefachim? So if it's less than 10 tefachim deep, 10 handbrats, and a shor chamor falls in and dies, you're patur, because that type of bore should not have killed. Huzakbo, but if it's less than 10 tefachim and you get injured by it, okay, the shor chamor falls in and gets injured, chayav, you have to pay for damages. Now, at what depth do you have to pay for damages according to this? It's not clear. So it's definitely less than 10 tefachim. Well, the Gemara is going to say, my lav mi mata lemala kachashiv. Do they not mean to say from bottom up, meaning the haKapar, that this is what they meant to say? Mi tefach va'ad asara mi taleka nizakini. Anywhere from 1 tefach deep to 10 tefachim deep, we're going to say, until you get to 10 tefachim, if it kills, you won't be liable. But if it causes damages, you will be liable, even if it's just a tefach, which shouldn't really cause damage, right? So from here, you see that if it's 1 tefach deep and it causes damage, you're liable. Alma l'nizakin koldehu, right? Therefore, you see, nizakin, it doesn't matter if you really didn't do much. If it couldn't really have injured, like a 1 tefach deep pit, you can't really call that a pit. 1 tefach little indentation in the ground shouldn't have caused damage, but if it did, you're liable anyway. Shma mina, ein omdim l'nizakin. So it sounds like we don't do an umdana and assess, could this have really caused that kind of damage? Because you're going to be liable no matter what. And that's the first attempt to prove. The answer is no. There is not umdana l'nizakin. To which the Gemara says, no, you misunderstood that source. What do you mean? We go from the top down, meaning the Mishna talked about 10, and we're dropping it to 9. A little less than 10. Okay, where we draw the line is a good question. 9, 8, 7, okay, something like that. Then you'll pay damages, because that is a pit that could cause damage, meaning there is umdana. If it's 1, you're not going to be liable for that at all. And then you could say the opposite, there is omid l'nizakin. So this source is inconclusive which direction it goes in. Okay, next attempt. One more line. Right, so each implement, as much as it could damage, that's how much, we're going to make you liable if theoretically it could damage. If it couldn't damage, somehow the person gets damaged, then you're not going to be liable. Tashma, next attempt to prove. This one is going to try to prove the other direction. There is umdana l'nizakin. Hikau ale novasimo. Here you have an eved. You hit your eved on his eye and blind him. You blind him. Alos nova chersho on his ear, and you cause him to go deaf. Eved yotzei b'hem l'chigut. The slave goes free. That's a basic law. Keneged eino ve'eino roeh. If you did it near his eye and then he went blind, or keneged ozno, near his ear but not in his ear, and eino shomea, and now he's deaf, eino shomea, ein eved yotzei b'hem l'chigut. He doesn't go free. Now, my timer, is it not lav mishum debi'inan umdana? Is it not because you need umdana? And basically, if I hit you on your face somewhere near your eye, but not on your eye, and you go blind, that's not because of that. that kind of hit shouldn't cause that kind of injury. So therefore, I'm not liable, meaning you don't go free if you're the slave. And then, the fact that the slave doesn't go free seems to prove that there's umdana for nizakin. To which the Gemara says, no, it's not why. Here, it's obvious what caused the damage, and it's damage you're not liable for. Why is that? It has nothing to do with umdana. Mishum de amrinan hu de avit nafshe. Well, what do we know? That if it must be that if I hit you in your ear and you go deaf, it's because you went into a state of shock. It's psychological. Okay? That's how we would say it nowadays. Psychological. Which means, now, why is psychological? Why am I exempt from that? So as they say, if I scare you somehow and cause damage, I'm patur in the world of, in the court of law, but I'm chayab b'dinei shamayim. Now, I did cause you an injury. So in the heavenly court, they're going to make me liable. But in the human court, I'm not liable. They can't make me pay for that. Ketzad. Now, why is that? The reason is because it's grama. It's indirect damage. I did something which caused you a reaction, and then that reaction caused you to go deaf. We don't pay for indirect damages. And here's the example they bring in the braita. Ketzad. Takaba ozno v'chersho. I blew in your ear and caused you to go deaf. Patur. Okay, again, what takabos know is a good question exactly, but it's something somehow that they think wasn't the kind of thing that should cause you to go deaf, but it happened to cause you to go deaf. But if I grab you and I grab your ear, blow in your ear, and I cause you to go deaf, chayav. Again, this is unclear exactly what we're talking about here, but the point is they're distinguishing between a direct action that what I did caused you damages, and an action that was more your body's reaction to it and more your psychological reaction, which actually caused more damage than should have. Okay, so in the end, this doesn't prove anything about umdana because it has nothing to do with umdana. This is all because it's indirect damages and that's why you're exempt, not because we assessed that this couldn't cause that kind of damage. Tashma, third source. The 5 things that you're liable for. Okay, I injure you. And then the court assesses what's the damage, what do we assess the medical bills are going to be? We don't really know. We make an assessment, right? Nowadays, when you have an insurance claim from a medical issue, you wait till after you paid and then you get the reimbursement. This is the reverse. We're going to assess how much we think it's going to cost, and that's how much damages they're going to pay you. And shevet, we're going to assess how many days. This is, I know in Israel it works this way. I assume in America, I don't know, but Israel, you go to a doctor, you're sick. The doctor gives you a note to give to your employer that says this person needs 3 days of rest, right? Do you really need 3 days of rest? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe after 2 days you'll feel good. You could go back to work, right? But he assessed 3 days. That's exactly what we're going to discuss here. So we make an estimate. How many days do we think you're going to be sick in bed with us and miss work? So it says here, what if, so ripoy v'shevet ad sheet rapeh, the ripoy and the shevet, that's the real one that could change, which is, right, we assess how many days of a doctor you're going to need, what are the bills going to be, how much medicine, and how many days you're going to end up at home. What if they assess, and then it was schlepping along? It wasn't 3 days. They were sick for 5 days, and they missed 5 days of work. Or needed to go to the doctor more often. Well, tough luck. You don't get any more. Fascinating, right? You would have thought the opposite. If they said 3 days and you got up at 2 days and went back to work, you still get the shevet for the 3rd day. Now, what does this have to do with our topic? Actually, really nothing. But right now, they're going to say, what do you see here? They make an assessment. So what do you see here? There's an assessment for nizakin. So they say, what are you talking about? This is not the umdana that we were asking about. We were asking, okay, it's the same word, umdana, which means assessment, but one has nothing to do with the other. I wasn't asking how much is this going to cut out of your ability to go to work or how much not. I was asking a question about umdana. Do we assess how much damage this person could have caused using that implement? It's a totally different question. This is a weird source to have brought, right? Obviously, we're going to assess how many days are you going to end up being sick for and how many doctor's bills you're going to need. I was asking about the object. Could this object cause that damage or no? This has nothing to do with anything. Okay, so what's the story? Right, that's what I was asked. Tashma, fourth source. So we tried 3 sources, we rejected them. Fourth source. Shimon haTimni omer, my golf miuchad shemasor leidav leidim, af kol shemasor leidav leidim, shmamina yesh omed lenizikid shmamina. So here's our answer, which I already told you we were going to get to, which is, Shimon haTimni, and even Rabbi Akiva disagrees. He just disagrees about does the implement have to come to the court. But he thinks the witnesses need to do that assessment. So either which way, you need assessment. So that's our answer, which we could have easily gotten to without trying to go through, trying to find it from other sources. But again, this is how the world of the Beit Midrash worked. They didn't know this as they asked, and we're having a discussion. Someone said, oh yeah, wait, I know this braita, and then brought it in. Amar. Now we're going to talk about this very interesting topic. We have, first of all, a lot of really interesting topics in today's stuff that are going to come up as we discuss. So here's one. Amduhu v'hivli, notnim lo kol masha amduhu. So now we didn't really get into this because we were focused on what we brought it for. But now we're going to go back to this. I don't understand. If they assess you need doctor's bills of this amount, right? And then it turns out you didn't need it, you get extra. Seems weird, right? Well, Misayele le Rabba. This supports Rabba de Amarava. Haiman de amdu lekula yoma ve'itpach lepalgad yoma. They assessed you will not go to work for a full day. And it turns out half day you were able to go back to work. The covet of Yiditan, you do your job that day. You get the whole day. Why is that? Min shamayahu derachmei. Because we assume that God had mercy on you. And that's like a gift from God. The fact that we assessed you in one way and you ended up healing quicker, we view that as an act of God. What if it's the reverse and you need more doctor's bills? So we view that as you yourself didn't take the doctor's advice, possibly. You didn't, right? You didn't take the medicine. All sorts of things. It could be you caused it. And that is, we assume that whatever assessment they make, even though we all know people make mistakes, but we're assuming the assessment was accurate. If something happened in one way, in the good way for you, well, that must have been God helped you. If it was in a bad way, it must be you did something to, right, mess things up and it's your fault and therefore you don't get more. By the way, halachically, so this is true halachically. However, if for whatever reason they didn't do the assessment, then we do it post facto. If for whatever reason the court didn't do any sort of assessment and you went to the doctor and then you can bring your receipts and basically say, okay, pay me now, okay, for whatever amount it was. But if they did an assessment, then it goes by the assessment. Now we're going to go back to the case in the Mishna of rakak v'higia bo harok ve'avir. By the way, this is interesting in light of the sugya we saw about nitzna reshut l'rofei l'rapot, even though it's God-given, right, a punishment. Here, there's sort of an interplay. We assume the doctors intervene, but we also know that God intervenes. And if it's l'tovatcha, it goes to your credit, so you win. Okay? Right? It's like a balance, how much we view God factoring into this and how much we don't. Rakak v'higia bo harok. Okay, so if they spit and it gets to you, what does it mean to you? So they're going to say, no, Amar Papa lo shanu ela bo. It's only if you pay this amount of nezek, of boshet, right, of the humiliation, if someone spit and their saliva got onto your body. But aval bebigdo lo, but not if it got onto your clothes. That's not as humiliating if it just got on your clothes. So they say, what do you mean it's not humiliating? If someone spits on you, what's the difference if it gets on your clothes or gets on your face? That's humiliating. And so maybe it's not an action because there's no saliva on your body, but it did get on your clothes. And this should be no different than humiliating you with words. Now here, this is a fascinating and super important topic we're always talking about these days, about libel and slander and all that. We're now going to see what Judaism has to say about this. So, the fact that it's only on your body and not on your clothes, you don't have to pay. And that's no different than libel, basically. It sounds, right? So he says, from here you can infer, by if you humiliate or shame someone, that you're exempt, okay? Because if you're exempt from it getting on your clothes, you're exempt from libel. And in fact, the halacha rules that you're exempt. Fascinating. You can't make someone pay according to halacha for libel. However, the Rambam distinguishes between someone, and based on some source, I think it's in the Yerushalmi, based on someone who shames someone who's a Talmid Chacham. It's a different law if you're a Torah scholar. That, I guess, is considered shaming God. And therefore, he holds, and he even says people do it a lot where I live, And you can look at the Rambam in Chovel Umazik, Parak Gimel, the third chapter. I think, if I remember correctly, the third chapter, Alacha Hey to Zion, maybe. He talks about this whole topic, very interesting. And he writes this, and then the Shulchan Aruch paskins like him, which is exactly, I see, Becky, you're quoting, and you don't get a portion of the world to come if you humiliate someone. And then he starts to go on about how it's obviously considered something very serious if you humiliate someone. He quotes these lines about, all these sentences about how it's a terrible thing, and he should do it. But the fact is, we can't make you liable to pay money in court for it. Okay? Although, like I said, the Rambam distinguishes Tamid Chacham and Lo, and not. And again, also the Shulchan Aruch, the Rama, they try to come up with, well, you really shouldn't do this, and it's really usher, but it's very hard for them to get to, you actually pay. It's a super interesting topic, how we deal with this in halakha. Okay, moving on though, because we have a lot of super interesting topics today, and a long daf. So, moving on. Hakol lefi chvodo. So now we said, the Mishna had set up all these things, you pay X amount. Then the Kamma said, well, it's all according to the person who was humiliated and where they are in society. So, Ibayah, who we asked this question at the time, we quoted Rashi, who said, but the Gemara is going to ask this, Tanakama lekula kamar or lechuma kamar? Is he being more lenient or more stringent? Meaning, lekula kamar, is he being more lenient, saying, Di'ika ani delo ba'in lemishkal kulei, those amounts were all for wealthy people, but if you're poor, you pay less. If you humiliate someone poor, then the damage is less, and therefore you're going to pay less. Doesn't matter. You could be rich. Dilma, or perhaps lechumra kamar. Maybe they mean lechumra, strict. This was the basic. If you did it to a wealthy person, you'd have to pay even more than those amounts. So they say, Tashma, let's learn it from the rest of the Mishnah. The reaction to Tanakam. Rabbi Akiva, afilu aniyim shebi Yisrael ru'inotam ke'ilu hem b'nei chorin, she'ardu minechsehen, shehem b'nei Avram, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, shma mina Tanakama lekula kamar shma mina. Rabbi Akiva says, no, we're going to view the poor people as if they were like everybody else. So that means that everybody else pays whatever the Mishnah said. Tanakama said the poor get paid less. And Rabbi Akiva said, no, the poor get paid just like everybody else. And therefore, we assume that the Tanakama was going lekula, that if you did it, not the poor, sorry, I said it wrong. If you did it to a poor person, then you'll pay less. Okay? So that's and then Rabbi Akiva says, if you did it to a poor person, you can pay the same as everybody else, because we're all the sons of, that's a beautiful line, we're all the sons of Abraham, Yitzchak, Yaakov. No one should be treated any differently. When it comes to humiliation, everyone gets humiliated. They're all human beings, and therefore, everyone's going to get the same amount. Now we're going back to that crazy case where the guy tried to trip up the woman and get her to uncover her hair to show she didn't care. We're going to deal with it from two different aspects. The first is a very side point. And then if you remember, he said, give me a little time before I have to pay. And then he had set her up. So, do we really give people time? Rabbi Hanina says, you don't get any extra time. If you owe damages, you have to pay right away. They say, we're going to distinguish between an injury and a humiliation. Humiliation, there's no loss of money for her. If he caused her a loss of money and she never can't work and all that, of course he has to pay her right away. But here it was just humiliation. That was no financial loss for her. It's just now we're going to give her because she was humiliated. That you can push off. Now we're going to get to another super interesting topic. So Shmara omedet al petach hatzera, right? And then it said basically, Rabbi Akiva says to him, if you remember, he says, listen, anyone who injures themselves, even though they're not allowed to do it, they don't have to pay themselves damages. But you who injures someone else has to pay damages. The assumption from that line was, you can't injure yourself. But in a different source, it says, in the same story, but a different version of it, it said, haTimni, in a braita, it said, Amar lo Rabbi Akiva, Salat b'mayim adirim ve'alei tacheres b'yadecha. You dive down into deep waters and all you came up with was some shards. It's a great line, okay? Meaning you tried to do this whole thing, but you gained nothing by doing this, what you just did for her, trying to prove. Why? Because Adam rashalach bo batzmo. Because anyone who wants to can injure themselves. Now, in the end, the bottom line is the same thing. You have to pay her the money no matter what. But what he said is the opposite. He said, anyone can injure themselves if they want. Now, another thing, he said, people can't injure themselves, but they don't have to pay damages if they did. Now, that's a huge question. Are you allowed, and this is a super fascinating topic, are you allowed to cause physical harm to yourself or not. So this source seems to say you can, and our Mishna said you can't. So Rabba gives a very simple answer, which we're going to reject. But Rabba says in our Mishna they were talking about boshet. I'm sorry, in this source they were talking about boshet. Anyone can lachbo batzmo, he meant humiliate themselves. That you can always do because that's not causing physical injury to yourself. If you want to humiliate yourself in public, go for it. There's nothing wrong with that. But you can't cause physical injury. Our Mishna was talking about physical injury, to which they say, but the whole case was about boshet. How could you say our Mishna was only talking about physical injury? And now turning to Amud Bet, Vikatane, and it says there, and it says you can't do it. And the topic was boshet, to which they say no. This is what it really said. You don't even need to talk about, obviously, boshet. Boshet, which was our case, basically the way they're reading the Mishna is like this. You humiliated her, and you're saying she humiliated herself. Well, of course, anyone, if they want, can humiliate themselves. And then, right, and then, of course, since she can humiliate herself, you are not allowed, though, to do it to her. Okay, but even he just added, even even physical injury, which a person can't do to themselves. Okay, but even others, right, who can't injure themselves, even if they do that, still you can't do it to them. So basically, we're setting up this distinction. The Mishnah was talking about injury, boshet you actually could do to yourself, but actually inflicting a wound, you can't. And the braita, which said you can't do it, which said you can do it, was talking about just the humiliation. So that seems to work. However, the Gemara is going to reject it right now. Wait a minute. We're going to bring another source that shows you can injure yourself. haTimni. Now we're talking about a totally different topic. If I take an oath to do something or to not do something, I have to keep it. If I don't keep to my oath, I get punished. Now the pasuk there says lahara or lahativ. If I make something that's bad for me or that's good for me, either way, I have to keep it. It's called a shvuah bito. We'll get to it when we get to Masechet Shvuah. You might have thought if I say if I take an oath, I'm gonna do something terrible to myself, like injure myself, and then I don't do it. Maybe I'll be exempt because I shouldn't be doing it anyway because it's forbidden for me to injure myself. So it's like taking a shvuah against something that the Torah says I can't do. Right? I'm not allowed to do that. So maybe I'd be exempt. Talmud lomar lahara u'leitiv, but the pasuk says to do bad or to do good. Just like doing good to myself is I can do it if I want. I don't. Right? If I'm always allowed to do good things to myself, even doing bad things to myself is a permission. I can do it if I want. And therefore, if I took an oath about it, if I took an oath to do something bad, like, for example, injure myself, and I don't do it, I actually have to pay, I have to deal with the shvuah bito and all the punishments that are associated with that. I have to bring korban and sacrifice, etc. So, what do you see here? I'm allowed to injure myself. That's what seems clear from here. So how could you say that everyone agrees I don't when here it seems like I can't? Amar Shmuel be'eshei betani. When it means lahara, it doesn't necessarily mean to hurt yourself. It means to fast, not eat. That's hurting myself, but that's not, right? That's allowed. I could sit and fast. Wait. But the braita there continues, and it talks about a case. What if I take an oath to hurt someone else? And now, if we're comparing hurt myself is sitting in a fast, hurting other people is making them sit in a fast. What? Me, motive lihu b'tanita, can I force other people to fast? No, I can't do that. Must be injuring them. To which the Gemara says, oh, what do you mean? Of course I can force people to fast. How so? We actually had this just before, although it wasn't connected with fasting. But in dimahadik lihu ba'androna, if I lock you in a room, remember we talked about what's shevet without damages? If I lock you in a room, you can't go to work. Here, I can make you fast. If I lock you in a room and there's no food, I'll make you fast. So theoretically, it could be. However, they're going to say, but look at the words in the braita there. You forgot the rest of the braita. What does it mean to do bad to other people? I'll hit someone and blow their brains out, okay? And smash their brains. So clearly, hara'at yourself, the comparable case, doing it yourself, is actually physical injury. And therefore, they actually say that from this source, it means you can actually cause physical injury to yourself. To which they say it's a machloket tanaim. And in fact, that's the way we paskin. You are not allowed to injure yourself. Then we have another opinion that says you can. So now the Gemara wants to know, who's the Tanu who holds that you can't injure yourself? And now they're going to suggest a bunch of suggestions till they conclude. Maybe it's this time. It says, this is in the Psukim. If you remember, after the flood, Noach is told a whole bunch of things like, have children, and then he's told, don't kill other people. And in that pasuk it says, your blood for your soul I will demand. Now, your blood for your soul, what are we talking about? Rabbi Elazar, if you kill yourself, I will punish you after death. Okay, this is the verse, one of the sources for why you cannot commit suicide. And this is, again, another whole fascinating topic. We don't have time to delve into it. Nowadays, the whole perspective on suicide has changed because people understand that it comes from, I can't find the words in my head right now, but from a psychological, right? There's more, why can't I think of the word? Someone can help me. But it's a much more, comes from a psychological disorder, from mental health. That's the word. I couldn't come up with the word. Comes from mental illness. It's not the same as, it's not like just I say, I want to commit suicide and go against what the Torah says and, kill myself, which is forbidden by Torah law, even if you're not doing it. So anyway, there's a whole, right? This is a topic that the more there's awareness about mental health and mental illness, this whole perspective has changed. Like it used to be, you couldn't get buried in a cemetery if you committed suicide. Nowadays, it's very rare that they don't allow that. Okay, it depends. There are certain communities that still perceive it differently, but for the most part, it's actually viewed very differently nowadays. And this has all kind of become mostly irrelevant. But in any case, what do you see here? If you want to say this is the person who says you can't injure yourself, you could clearly distinguish between killing and injuring, right? Just because you can't kill yourself doesn't mean that you can't injure yourself. So that's not a good proof. Second attempt. You can tear kriya for a dead, we do this, and that's not considered like the Gentiles do. But if you tear your clothes too much, that's destructive. That's something else. And then they would say, well, if you can't tear your clothes, kol sheken gufo, well, the more so, not your body. Well, they say no, that's not a proof. Dilma b'gadim shani, that kal v'chomer with a kol sheken doesn't necessarily make sense because maybe clothes are different. Because it can't be undone. Whereas injury to your body, it'll eventually heal. He had Rabbi Yochanan, first of all, Rabbi Yochanan called his clothes my glory, like that's how I show who I am, and therefore maybe clothes are really almost more important than the body. There's a funny proof. When he would walk between thorns and thistles, have a medalli lemani, he would pick up his clothes. It would mean to prevent his clothes from getting torn, but his body would get thorns, right? Whenever I go on a hike, right, you want to make sure you have pants covering your legs so that your legs don't get hurt by thorns and thistles. But he was worried about his clothes getting ripped. He said, this will heal, this will not. So better off saving my clothes. So there you can't say. Ella, and you're going to be surprised. I was a little surprised by this. Hatana who did Tanya, or at least pleasantly surprised. We're getting back to something we saw many, many times in second Nidarim and Nazir. Amar Rabbi Elazar haKapar b'Rebbe. This is the one that matches. If you remember, the nazir has to bring a korban chatat, sin offering. Why? What did he do wrong? He tortured himself by swearing off of wine. So if it was just from wine, you get punished and have to bring a sin offering, all the more so you actually physically injure your body. So that was our source finally for how we know that you can't do self-mutilation. Okay, that's an interesting topic. And the fact there's a machloket about it is even more interesting. They don't actually delve into the other side, probably because we don't hold that way, but they do mention that it exists. Okay, a little bit more. If I go to court and say, you killed my shor, you cut my tree, and you claim, what do you mean? You told me to do it. patur, you're exempt. To which the Kamma says, Amar le, Kilu Rav says to Rabbi Hanna who said this, Im ken lo shafachta chaye lebriata kol kamine. What are you, crazy? Anytime you can basically do anything to my stuff. When I go and claim in court, you did it. You say you told me to do it and you're exempt. What do you mean? What's going to prevent anybody from doing that? Amar le ismiye. So he says, okay, so if I heard this braita, should I just erase it? It's not a good braita. Amar le lo, to targem matnita. No, just explain it differently. It's talking about doing ukimta. The shor haomed lariga, ubi ilana haomed l'ktzitza. It must be a shor that was judged to be a shor niskal, or a tree that was used for avodah zarah purposes. There was anyway going to have to be cut down. It wasn't worth anything. So they say, well, if it wasn't worth anything, yachi, right? And that's why you could claim, oh, you told me to do it, because it anyway isn't worth anything. So then they say, well, if it wasn't worth anything, then why are we in court about this? My katanle, what's my claim then? This is a fascinating line also. I wanted to cut it down and fulfill the mitzvah of cutting down a nashera tree. I wanted to kill the shor. Dear Tanya, how do we know that there's such a value to that? And then, so there's a value to that, which we're going to prove in a minute. And then that's what you're exempt from, that. Dear Tanya, this is the mitzvah of when you slaughter an animal, you have to cover the blood. You spill it and then pour it, and then cover it. Misha shafach, the one who spilled the blood, who slaughtered the animal, he does the covering. Someone slaughtered, the other guy covered. So what do you see here? You can basically get paid for stealing someone's mitzvah. And that's what they were arguing about. And that's what you can claim. You told me to do it, because the assumption is that I probably did tell you to do it, because in the end, it's not the biggest deal whether I cut it or you do. There, it makes more sense that I told you to cut it, rather than if it was my nice tree that was worth a lot of money, I certainly wouldn't have told you to cut it. Okay, last part for today. I'm a Rav. Now we're going to talk about what kind of fruit tree are you not allowed to cut, because that was the whole thing in the Mishna. We said, Rabbi Akiva said, even though I can't cut down my own tree, if I do, I don't have to pay myself, whereas if you do it, you have to pay me. So how much fruit needs to be potentially growing on this tree for it to say it's a fruit tree that you're not allowed to cut? This comes from a pasuk in the Torah that you're not allowed to cut a fruit tree. If you want to build a siege on a city, you have to take a tree that's not a fruit tree. If it could grow a kav of fruit, then you can't mitive, but there's a contradiction. A quarter of a kav for olives. So they say, that's not a contradiction. Olives are more important. Last line for today. Rabbi Hanina lo shachiv shivchat birei. Hard line to read. My son Shivchat died. Why? On account of eladakatz teina below zimne. He cut a tree before its time, meaning it was a fruit tree that was going to grow and produce a lot of fruits, and he cut it down. This is obviously a double image. He's saying, first of all, he's trying to show how serious it is to cut down a tree, and that must have caused my son's death, because you probably looked to say, what caused my son's death? That was the action he saw, but there's an obvious analogy here. Midah keneged midah. He cut down a tree before it bore fruits. He was killed before he was able to bear fruits, right? Before he was able to have children. That's why he died young. There's an obvious comparison. Okay, quick review. Because it's late, but we started with the short time shizik versus the shor muad and connected it to the machloket of, or potentially, maybe it had to do with Rabbi Shimon haTimni, maybe not. Then we asked the question, we brought four sources. The fourth one was Rabbi Shimon haTimni and Rabbi Akiva, which had obviously proved, they hadn't seen that braita before. The other sources didn't really work. Then we went off on a aside about assessment of damages. If you assess them incorrectly, the doctor's bills and the time having to stay home from work, we leave it as the assessment was. Then we talked about the slandering and how you don't actually get paid for slander. You can't charge money. You can't get claim in court. Then we talked about it, and only if it gets on the body. Then we talked about was tanakam l'kula or l'chumra. Then are you allowed to give time for people? We distinguish between if it's financial compensation or not, like boshet, which is not. Then we had the whole thing about, are you allowed to injure yourself or not? The two different sources, one seemed to say yes, the other seemed to say no. And then we tried to figure out who's the Tana who says you can't injure yourself. And that we found eventually Rabbi Elazar haKapar. And then we talked about these fruit trees and cutting down fruit trees. And with that, we finished, and we'll continue with that tomorrow. Wishing everybody a good day and b'sorot tovot.